Utah Republican and Democratic delegates have a massive impact on picking elected leaders in the state. In some races, it only takes a handful of delegate votes to determine who represents thousands of Utahns. Every 2 years, on a Tuesday night in March, Republican and Democratic voters gather in neighborhood meetings where they elect delegates who will represent them at the county and state conventions. After that, candidates will spend weeks trying to woo these delegates. Cottage meetings, town hall meetings, luncheons, you name it, trying to win them over and get their vote at convention. It is a lot of effort to win over just a small number of people. But those delegates wield a ton of power in Utah politics. For example, Republican State Senator Lincoln Fillmore needed just 116 votes at the Salt Lake County Republican Convention to secure the party nomination. He doesn't have a Democratic challenger in November, and his district is solidly Republican, so he'll likely cruise to re-election. Those 116 delegates who voted for Fillmore most likely decided who's going to represent the 59,000 voters in that district for the next 4 years. Republican Representative Candace Perucci got 91% of the delegate vote, which was a convincing win at convention. But to get 91%, she only needed 68 votes from delegates. Her district, again, is solidly Republican. Republicans outnumber Democrats 5-1, so she's a heavy favorite to win in November. It's not just the Republicans. Democratic delegates kicked incumbent Representative Brett Garner to the curb at their convention in favor of Verona Mauga. Ironically, Garner got his seat in the legislature after he was elected by delegates to replace Representative Karen Kwan, who was elected by delegates to replace Senator Karen Main, who stepped down because of health reasons. The party caucus system tends to favor very small but very intense groups of partisan minorities. This year, just 9% of registered Republican voters attended their neighborhood caucus meetings. Out of that 9% is where the delegates at the county and state conventions came from. The caucuses and conventions tend to produce candidates with more extreme political views. That's because a small number of party activists control the nominating process. The power of those delegates has been diminished somewhat in recent years in Utah with the advent of the ability for candidates to gather signatures to get on the primary ballot. So far this year, the signature path has saved several incumbents and other candidates who otherwise would have been voted out of the race by delegates. Arch-conservative Representative Ken Ivory got 38 votes from delegates at the Salt Lake County Republican Convention, and that would have been enough to send him straight to the November election. But his Republican challenger, Lisa Dean, gathered signatures, and because of that, she did not get eliminated at the convention. Instead, she's forcing Ivory into his first ever primary election. Perhaps the biggest example of how a decision to gather or not to gather signatures can impact a race is in House District 16. 2 years ago, moderate Republican Steve Handy decided not to gather signatures. That decision proved fatal to Handy's political career because he was ousted at convention. Trevor Lee needed just 53 votes from delegates to knock Handy out of the race. Since then, Lee has been a magnet for controversy. I reported that he ran an anonymous Twitter account where he posted hateful and anti-LGBTQ content and praised the far-right DesNat movement, which is favored by some members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This year, Lee has a Republican challenger, Daniela Harding, the former chair of the Davis County Republican Party. At convention, Lee got 65 votes from delegates, which would have been enough to give him the nomination and send him to the November election. But Harding gathered signatures, so now they face off in a primary in June.